Good day, I am Talcott Parsons, an American sociologist whose work laid the foundation for modern structural functionalism. My life's mission was to explain how societies maintain order, coherence, and continuity, despite rapid change. I was fascinated by the question, how is social order possible? Through my theories, I offered a framework for understanding institutions, roles, norms, and values, not as static components, but as dynamic interrelated systems. My goal was ambitious, to build a grand theory of society, integrating the micro world of individuals with the macro world of institutions. Welcome to socio-exploration. Join me as I guide you through the architecture of my ideas and the society they aim to explain. I was born on December 13, 1902, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to a family steeped in intellectual and religious tradition. My father was a minister and college president, and this mix of faith and scholarship shaped my early worldview. At Harvard, I developed a systematic framework for analyzing social life. My early work, The Structure of Social Action, 1937, positioned me as a bridge between classical European theory and modern American sociology. I championed Weber's emphasis on meaning and Durkheim's view of society as a moral order. But I wanted to go further. My task was not just to interpret society, but to build a theoretical system that explained how it works and persists. This led to my development of the AGIL model, pattern variables, and ultimately structural functionalism, the dominant sociological paradigm for decades. I studied biology and philosophy at Amherst College and later pursued economics and sociology at the London School of Economics and Heidelberg University. In Germany, I encountered the giants of European thought, Max Weber, Emil Durkheim, and Alfred Marshall, who deeply influenced my sociological vision. Returning to the United States, I joined Harvard University, where I would remain for most of my academic life. There, I sought to bring European depth into American empirical sociology.
I married Helen Bancroft Walker, and together we had 3 children. My family provided the grounding that allowed me to build an intellectual empire. While I was immersed in systems, values, and roles, Helen kept me grounded in the lived realities that theory sometimes forgets.
Until my passing on May 8, 1979, I remained devoted to synthesizing theory with empirical research. I continued to teach and write, even as newer paradigms, like conflict theory and symbolic interactionism, began to dominate the field. I died of a stroke in Munich, West Germany, where I was attending a conference. It was a sudden end, far from my academic home of Harvard, but perhaps fitting for someone who had always sought to bridge American and European sociological traditions. Though many expected my final resting place to be near Harvard, I was laid to rest at Old Burying Ground in Fairfield, Connecticut, United States, a quieter resting place, yet still symbolic of my American roots. My intellectual legacy lives on in the foundational concepts of modern sociology, roles, norms, systems, and equilibrium, terms that continue to shape how we understand institutions, from the family to the state. While some have critiqued my work as overly abstract or conservative, I always believed in the value of systemic analysis. Today, my theories serve as scaffolding upon which newer perspectives have been constructed. Sociology has evolved, but my contributions remain deeply woven into its structure. My goal was to develop a general theory of action that could explain how societies function and evolve. Drawing from the giants of European thought and American empiricism, I worked to build a framework that could unify the complexities of social life. Now, let me guide you through my theories, the key ideas that shape my understanding of action, structure, and the enduring fabric of society. 1. The AGIL scheme. In seeking to understand how societies maintain coherence, persist through time, and adapt to change, I developed what I called the AGIL scheme, a model for analyzing the functional prerequisites of any social system. These are 4 essential problems that every system, be it a family, an organization, or an entire society, must resolve in order to survive and operate effectively. These 4 functions are not arbitrary. They are necessary and universal. No system can exist without addressing them in some form. A. Adaptation. How does the system manage and interact with its environment? Every system must secure and allocate resources from its environment. It must adjust to external conditions and transform inputs into usable outputs. Institutional example. The economy performs this function by producing goods, generating income, and adapting to changing markets and technologies. Systemic function. Regulating the relationship between internal needs and external pressures. G. Goal attainment. How does the system define and achieve its collective objectives? A system must not only adapt, but also set goals and mobilize resources to achieve them. This involves decision-making, prioritizing, and enforcing action. Institutional example. The political system, e.g., government, is tasked with defining societal goals, implementing policies, and ensuring compliance. Systemic function, directing energy and resources toward purposeful collective outcomes. I. Integration. How does the system maintain internal solidarity and coherence among its parts? Any complex society faces internal tensions. It must coordinate interactions between individuals and institutions, ensuring cohesion and norm compliance. Institutional example. Legal and judicial systems perform this function by enforcing rules, mediating disputes, and upholding shared values. Systemic function. Preventing fragmentation and fostering unity. L. Latency. Pattern maintenance. How does the system preserve its cultural values and motivate participation? To endure over time, a system must instill values, norms, and motivations in its members. This process is often unconscious, embedded in cultural and socialization systems. Institutional example. The family, education, and religion maintain this function by nurturing identity, teaching values, and inspiring commitment. Systemic function, ensuring the transmission and internalization of core cultural patterns. 2. Structural functionalism. Structural functionalism is my most well-known contribution. I argued that society is like a living organism, made up of interdependent parts. Every institution, be it the family, religion, education, or law, serves a function to maintain stability and order. For example, the family socializes children into cultural norms. The legal system enforces these norms. Education prepares individuals for roles in the economy, which in turn sustains the system of production. In this view, change occurs slowly, through evolutionary differentiation, new roles and institutions emerging as society becomes more complex. Critics said I ignored conflict. I disagree. I acknowledge that tensions exist, but emphasize that societies develop mechanisms, like norms and rituals, to manage and contain conflict. 3. Pattern variables. In the course of analyzing the structure of social action, I found it necessary to formalize a set of basic dichotomies, what I termed pattern variables. These represent the fundamental dilemmas that every actor confronts when engaging in social relationships. They are not mere choices, but structured alternatives that define how roles are enacted and institutionalized within a social system. Each pattern variable marks a critical axis along which normative expectations are formed. They are the building blocks of role differentiation, helping us to understand why behavior differs across spheres such as the family, religion, education, law, and economy. Let me explain these dimensions more clearly. Affectivity versus affective neutrality. At the heart of many social roles lies the question, do I allow myself to be guided by emotional impulses, or must I restrain them in favor of objectivity? In affectivity, the actor invests emotional energy into the relationship, warmth, love, attachment. Think of a mother comforting her child. In affective neutrality, emotions are held in check. A judge must not allow personal feelings to color the application of the law. Thus, the actor must choose between emotional expression and emotional discipline based on the normative expectations of the role. T. Self-orientation versus collectivity orientation. Here the question becomes, is my action oriented toward my own interest, or toward the collective good. Self-orientation implies that the actor is motivated by personal goals, success, prestige, wealth. Collectivity orientation signifies that action is shaped by obligations to a group, family, community, nation. This pattern variable is essential in distinguishing between individualistic and collectivistic cultures and between egoistic and altruistic role demands. Universalism versus particularism. In this dimension, the issue is, do I apply the same standards to everyone or make distinctions based on relationships? Universalism requires that decisions and judgments be made based on general, impersonal rules, equity, fairness, law. Particularism, on the other hand, allows for special consideration based on who the other is, a friend, a relative, an ally. This variable accounts for the tension between rule-bound institutions, like bureaucracy, and relationship-based behavior, like kinship favoritism. V. Ascription versus achievement. This pattern variable asks, is my role assigned to me based on who I am, or have I earned it through what I do? In ascription, the individual's status is based on fixed attributes: age, sex, family lineage, caste. In achievement, status is acquired through individual effort, education, talent, performance. Thus, traditional societies tend toward ascription, whereas modern meritocratic societies favor achievement. V. Specificity versus diffuseness. Lastly, one must consider the scope of the relationship. Is my interaction with the other narrowly defined or broadly encompassing? A specific relationship is limited to a particular role or function, such as the interaction between a buyer and a seller. A diffuse relationship engages the person as a whole, such as that between lifelong friends or between spouses. In sum, these pattern variables illuminate the normative orientations embedded in different social roles. They are not meant to be rigid categories, but rather ideal types, conceptual tools to help us analyze the structure of expectations that surround human interaction. These variables are central to the functional differentiation of social systems and the maintenance of order in modern society. Fourth, social action as voluntary and meaningful. Though I am often remembered for large, abstract systems, I never lost sight of the individual actor, the person at the center of every social interaction. For me, action is not mechanical. It is intentional, purposeful, and embedded in a web of cultural meanings and social norms. I introduced the concept of the unit act, the basic building block of all social behavior. Every act, I argued, has four core elements. 1. An actor, the individual performing the action. 2. A goal, something the actor aims to achieve. 3. A situation, composed of conditions and means. 4. Normative orientation, the values and rules that guide the action. In simpler terms, action is goal-directed, but it is not random. It is shaped by what is culturally desirable, what is socially appropriate, and what is personally meaningful. You don't just choose to become a doctor or teacher or activist in a vacuum. Your choices are filtered through social expectations, institutional pathways, and shared symbols. Social action, then, is voluntary, but not unconstrained. We act with intention, but those intentions are shaped and limited by the structures we live in. Take a student preparing for an exam. The goal, passing, is clear. The means, studying, attending class, are understood. But the motivation comes from values, success, respect, responsibility, that the culture has instilled. This is value-oriented action, a type of action central to my theory. My lifelong pursuit was to understand the fundamental principles that hold societies together and allow them to function. I believe that human actions are not random or purely reactive, but guided by deep systems of values, norms, and roles. Influenced by the great European thinkers, I aimed to build a theoretical framework that could explain how individuals and institutions interact to maintain social order. For me, theory was not just an abstract exercise. It was a necessary tool to grasp the complexity of modern life. I devoted myself to developing concepts and models that could bridge the gap between individual motivations and the larger systems in which they operate, always striving to reveal the underlying patterns that sustain social life. 1. The Structure of Social Action, 1937. In The Structure of Social Action, I sought to reorient the sociological enterprise. I rejected the view that human behavior could be reduced to mere reactions to stimuli. Instead, I argued that action must be understood as voluntary and normatively regulated. Drawing on the insights of Weber, Durkheim, and Pareto, I traced a convergence among these thinkers toward a conception of action as both goal-directed and value-oriented. My task was to synthesize their contributions and construct a theoretical framework that could account for action as a meaningful and purposive phenomenon. This book, I believe, laid the cornerstone for what would later become the structural functional approach. 2. Essays in Sociological Theory, 1949. In this work, I presented a comprehensive theory of society as a system composed of interdependent and interrelated parts. My central thesis was that society functions as an organized and self-regulating system, where stability is achieved through the internalization of shared values and role expectations. I emphasized the concept of the role as a mediating link between the individual and the social structure. Institutions such as the family, religion, and education serve as mechanisms of social integration, binding individuals into a coherent moral order. The system survives and thrives through the successful socialization of its members into its core normative patterns. 3. The Social System, 1951. In this work, I presented a comprehensive theory of society as a system composed of interdependent and interrelated parts. My central thesis was that society functions as an organized and self-regulating system where stability is achieved through the internalization of shared values and role expectations. I emphasized the concept of the role as a mediating link between the individual and the social structure. Institutions such as the family, religion, and education serve as mechanisms of social integration, binding individuals into a coherent moral order. The system survives and thrives through the successful socialization of its members into its core normative patterns. 4. Working Papers in the Theory of Action, 1953. Together with Edward Shills, I extended the analytical reach of action theory. These papers were part of our ongoing effort to construct a general theory that could integrate individual motivations, cultural norms, and institutional structures. We explored how values are transmitted through cultural systems and internalized within personalities. Our purpose was to bridge the gap between psychology and sociology, to demonstrate that neither discipline alone could explain the complex nature of human action. This work continued to advance the proposition that action is meaningful, structured, and culturally embedded. 5. Toward a General Theory of Action, 1951, posthumously published. This volume, developed in collaboration with Shills and others, aimed to present a unified theory capable of encompassing the full range of human behavior. We sought to show that action is shaped not only by rational calculations or biological impulses, but by normative expectations deeply embedded in social systems. Influenced by Weber's concept of meaningful action, we argued that individuals operate within frameworks of value orientation that give direction and legitimacy to their behavior. The general theory we advanced here laid the foundation for understanding the interdependence of culture, personality, and social system. 6. Economy and Society, 1956. In collaboration with Neil Smelser, I turned my attention to the economic subsystem. Our core argument was that economic behavior cannot be adequately understood in isolation from its social context. The economy, we contended, is embedded within a broader structure of institutional norms, cultural values, and social relationships. Concepts such as trust, legitimacy, and role expectations are central to the functioning of markets. This work contributed to the emerging field of economic sociology, illustrating that even in domains dominated by exchange and efficiency, the logic of social integration remains paramount. 7. Societies, Evolutionary and Comparative Perspectives, 1966. This book represented my attempt to apply the structural functional framework to the study of social evolution. Using the AGIL scheme, adaptation, goal attainment, integration, and latency, I analyzed how societies evolve from simple to complex forms. I argued that the differentiation and specialization of institutional functions is the hallmark of societal development. Societies progress not by chance, but through their increasing capacity to manage complexity and sustain value consensus. My aim here was to offer a functionalist account of historical change that remained faithful to sociological reasoning. 8. The System of Modern Societies, 1971. This work served as both a synthesis and culmination of my intellectual journey. I sought to examine modern industrial societies through the lens of the AGIL framework and to show how they maintain stability in the face of rapid change. Bureaucracy, science, education, and law all were analyzed as subsystems that contribute to systemic equilibrium. Though modernity brings differentiation and potential conflict, I argued that these societies endure through mechanisms of value consensus, institutional coordination, and symbolic integration. The modern social system, I concluded, is held together not by coercion, but by shared cultural commitments. The social system, as I have sought to explain, is not a mere aggregation of individuals, but a structured set of patterned interactions regulated by shared norms and values. As I proposed in the AGIL framework, every system must meet the functional prerequisites of adaptation, goal attainment, integration, and latency to maintain stability. Society achieves order not by coercion alone, but because individuals internalize these normative expectations through socialization. As I have stated, the stability of the social system depends on the integration of its component parts and the conformity of its actors to institutionalized norms. My effort has been to demonstrate that human action is both constrained and enabled by the cultural and social structures within which it is embedded. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you never miss an update from Socio-Exploration. Your support keeps this journey alive. Thank you, and have a great day.